afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's MSME Masterclass. Our session focuses on a theme that's increasingly important for small and medium manufacturers working in the automotive supply chain. What OEMs, that is, original equipment manufacturers, expect from steel MSMEs. To guide us through this conversation, we are joined by a seasoned automotive expert, Mr. Krishna Bhojkar, partner at Bhojkar Consulting. Mr. Bhojkar brings over 32 years of industry experience, having held senior leadership roles at Tata Volkswagen India and ŠKODA AUTO Volkswagen India. His career spans key areas like component integration, supplier development, and product engineering, all closely aligned with what OEMs seek from their Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers. Now, in his advisory role at Bhojkar Consulting, he works directly with MSMEs to improve process reliability, component quality, and compliance with OEM standards, helping them level up for long-term partnerships. It's a pleasure to have him with us today. Let's get started. Good afternoon, sir. We're pleased to have you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this talk. I think it's a very relevant topic. So I think since we are looking at growth for India, so MSMEs we should definitely support and touch upon. Yeah, great. We can go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So let's kick things off with a basic one. How would you define a typical OEM expectation when it comes to sourcing for MSMEs?
Yeah, a good question. What I would like to do is try to give a brief background about OEs and how they are placed. So when we look at Indian OEMs, automotive or any bigger manufacturers, typically they are capex intensive. They are here for long-term business. So they need to ensure that the entire supply chain from tier 1, 2, 3 onwards, everything is taken care because they're here for the long term, and the capex intensive makes them very much vulnerable for whatever changes. Hence, they also look for a high amount of localization. The kind of product cycles that we are talking about with the market dynamics, all these things matter. So also the other portion which we find coming in is the kind of stakeholder engagement that they need to do. So there's a huge amount of pressure on them to, as a principal owners or principal drivers for the economy, they have a lot of compliances, there are a lot of regulations, there are a lot of stakeholder engagements that they need to do. And this aspect also need to be understood, including the aspect of, let's say, ESG, which is coming up as an example. So from my experience in both these companies, which you mentioned earlier, vendors are not just the suppliers for the components. They are long-term partners. As I said, we look at 20 years, 25 years of partnership. Hence, we look to all the supply chain as strategic partners which ensure that we are in a position to work together for a long term. So hence, the expectation from OEM will be to look at reliability, transparency, continuous improvements, and MSMEs are expected to be handheld by the OEMs, and growth has to be mutual. So we understand that we are trying to move from a job work mindset and towards becoming a system supplier mindset. So MSMEs are more interested into aligning with the OEs also now. So it's not only one side, so both sides are. So as I said, aspect of OE and MSMEs now slowly are coming together. There is better understanding on looking at a much more strategic partnership. So earlier we used to have kind of looking at a cost driven, or let's say, yes, India is potentially a very dependent on how you cost or. So this is one portion, but a long-term strategy and partnerships, OEMs are looking at, are you able to develop on over a longer life cycle where the components don't have the end risks for the OEs also. So it is going to be a very interesting thing as we see going forward.
And sir, in your experience, what is the first thing an OEM looks for when evaluating a steel MSME vendor?
Yeah, steel MSME vendor, typically we can look at, let's say, it could come from steel manufacturing base, one, or second could be from components. So you have stampings for it. So we'll try to cover in generic how the things should be looked at. The first thing that any company, before entering into any kind of discussions also, starts to look at the company's board level. So we look at how the board is constituted, what are their backgrounds, how do they think about. That becomes, because then we get a strategic alignment and understanding about the MSME, the direction, and the steps that they are likely to take in the future. Historical information about the company, looking at their finances, the balance sheets, the cash flow kind of things, which enable and ensure that the company has been developing itself and sits on a very solid kind of cash flow and financials. Looking forward, it's not only that, but we also do look at the legal and compliance aspect. So those become very, very important, and reputation in the market. Having said that, deep dive would be the next step to look at the organizational structure, the capability, competencies, and capacities that they have developed from a human standpoint, because majority of the cases we see as MSMEs, when we look at, it is more of, let's say, a couple of people driven or owner driven. So whether the structure is made that the systems are in place, whether it is a kind of a board or a team of people who are coming together and taking the decisions. These also matter a lot, because we don't want a company to be solely dependent on one person, and the biases should not be there. Hence, we look at those aspects as well. So once we are done with the managerial part of it, then we do come to the next level, where we look at the kind of installed capacities that they have, kind of operating systems that they have. So plant reliability, quality output, or quality systems that are in place. Also looking to how do they look at the sustainability factors, because today's business has to be resilient. So huge amount of issues, the OEs, whatever are placing or facing with supply chain issues or the markets going up and down, the resiliency in the whole chain needed to be evaluated. From that standpoint, we also look at the operational aspects of this and how the people behave and what kind of systems have they implemented. So that is at the next. So we are layering those things. And the last layer which we look at is to look at the technical and the technologies, kind of equipments, the capabilities that they have. And from the standpoint, our capability focus comes first, then later on we see at the capacity, because capacity is something which you can add, but the capability and the direction of the board or direction of the company, how they look into this becomes very important. Digital or data, if you remember, that's something which is coming up lately, and we also try to look at the digital roadmap. They have any aspect to look at, because we are wanting to use that all possible digital technologies to ensure we fetching information, data, because traceability, tracking, all these things are going to play an extremely important role for the entire lifetime. And the other aspect which will be looked into is when you're looking at MSME. So, for example, VW in this case. VW will not evaluate only for Indian operations, but they will also look at a global perspective. Can I use this same skill for my global operations as well? So the aspects to look at also differ. So local is one portion, as well as MNCs will look at much more broader picture. So MSMEs need to be kind of preparing themselves for both aspects.
Understood. So do you think most MSMEs understand the documentation, quality and compliance mindset that OEMs operate with?
This is very interesting and challenging, let me say, because whatever we have seen from our perspective, and I have since taking over and doing a lot of consulting, MSMEs are, let's say, technically on a very good level. However, when it comes to documentation, where we find a lot of gaps, I would not say they're not doing anything, but the level of requirements that are there, especially, let's say, if you go to VDA 6.3 or those kind of compliance requirements which are there is a huge amount of gap that we see. And the things usually, kind of are available when you look at the PPAP documentation or control plans or traceability records. Or let's say kind of the change management systems. So this become a real big challenge. And as I said, companies are now, MSMEs are the tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers for them. So being the principal owner, the ESG is becoming as one of the compliance requirements. So I'll touch upon that a bit later also, but just to brief you, what kind of carbon has been created, and the entire chain since the scope 1, 2, 3 are required to be put together. That documentation is not available. So there I see a big gap where MSMEs definitely need to do a lot. But their understanding is coming up. And I think there is a lot of, let's say, we need to enhance the pace of working. So they are knowing, or let's say they have started getting that pressure, but I think the pace is still a lot more less.
Got it. So can you also walk us through the kind of technical audits OEMs usually conduct before onboarding a supplier?
For the steel, let's say we'll look at three different. So you have basic steel, which comes in as sheet metal. So that's something which I'll deep dive on. And since I've been from automotive industry, the other thing could be castings or forging and the finished components which come out of that basic process. But the essence will be the thing, small changes will be there from these two processes. But I'll try to, let's say, kind of cover the sheet metal, especially. The kind of process audits will be there and kind of compliance audits will be there and product related audits. So we look at the pre-qualification, which I explained earlier also, where we try to look at the kind of infrastructure which they have, the kind of process capability and part complexity that they are able to handle. We also try to audit whether they have a possibility to value add. So when I mean by value add, let's say I have a sheet metal component which could be having certain assembly. It could be only nuts or certain welded bolts, or we can have a couple of components. So we are looking at higher level assemblies. So in that aspect, we need to also deep dive and understand whether they have the capability to do that and their willingness, because it calls for certain amount of capex. Also, we look at the kind of certifications which are out. So QMS will be there. So 16949. Those kind of things definitely will be there. Then from the capability, next is the technical portion of it, where we look at whether the manufacturing process flows are done, tooling capability studies are done, whether they have good inspection system. When we mean by inspection system, it's not only good equipment, but a process behind. And if in case of any issues, how the escalation happens, what kind of a CAPA or corrective action, preventive action systems are in place. So those aspects also are looked into. It's not only looking at how the equipments are placed, how the reaction happens, how the company finds its way to resolve a problem, how quickly they are in a position to overcome those issues. Next is looking at the engineering systems, which talk about, let's say, the change management, which is very, very vital for any company, and how the data is getting collected. So do they have any systems where data is collected, where you have track and trace? So traceability becomes a key factor for anything now. And those aspects, when we are done, then we will definitely go for, let's say, the quality measurement systems, where we will look at the APQP. Now, MSMEs definitely will have a challenge here because APQP is a much more bigger aspect. It has a lot of things involved. So that is where they will be required to handhold with the MSME. So OE has got a much more bigger role to play here, where quality system audit, hand-holding for APQP, ensuring that they understand what are the stages in that, what are the PPAP for the production part approval process capabilities that they need to build in, or the SPC deployment, measurement system analysis, calibration. So this is next level of quality systems audit is what we do. Next comes is the process audit, which typically happens on the shop floor. And there is an extensive focus by especially German companies on the processes that are followed. Because at the end, your outcome in terms of both quality, quantity, and timely operations is mainly focused and delivered from the processes that you follow. So how the real production conditions work, what kind of operator competence is there, what kind of process discipline is there, whether traceability is there, whether digital tools are being used. Because this kind of focus approach for process audit enable and help us to ensure that on a long term, we have a sustainable and a reliable and a resilient partner for us. So that focus is coming up. Next comes is when actual production will go through, or let's say, we also try to look at the cycle times. And are they in a position to hit the cycle time which they have quoted for? Let's say I require every component, or we make cars at, let's say, 2 minutes per minute, 2 minutes for one car. So I'll be requiring component supply also. So the cycle time from their side, what kind of line balancing has been done, how the bottlenecks are coming up, and how the resolution process. Here the main focus, as I said, is going to be how quickly they are able to understand where their problems are, what are the bottlenecks, and how quickly they are in the position to resolve. Because the speed of resolution becomes the key factor for this kind of industries, and the speed of quality reaction. So you have a problem, now how quickly you are in the position to resolve that. Next will be like HS and the sustainability, which will typically look at the pollution, hazardous, legal, or the energy or the carbon systems. Because there, as I said, the tier 1, 2, 3, where we look at the ESG standpoint, what are the emissions which are coming from the scope 3? So whatever my supply chain is there, what are the carbon emissions which are coming up? So this anyway will be coming up. So I would say that MSMEs start on this journey. It's going to be a journey. So the first step, they need to start understanding what does it mean by scope 3, how OEs will be demanding this. And as we are going further in this, we know that the global warming is really going to impact. So the scope 3 emissions are going to be extremely important, and everybody needs to support the OE to give this data. Then the next process will be to look at the process-wise topics, which will be, let's say, as I said, if you are looking at sheet metal, we will look at very important thing is how the raw material has been handled. So we have coils which are coming up. So sometimes we do a study where we look from dispatch from the steel manufacturer, how it is getting loaded on the truck, what kind of support mechanism, how the logistics is, what route is followed. Because I can give one example where there were very big potholes and the truck used to go down, and you can have a picture, and we used to have small dents which are coming on the sheet metal. So the first 4, 5 or 10 coils, which would be amounting to, let's say, 10 meters of the sheet metal used to be damaged with dents. So these kind of things also matter a lot. So if we need to ensure our quality and we don't have scrappage just due to transportation, we need to go to that level of understanding and try to look at how the transportation is there, what kind of things are used. Next example I can quote or give is it's the supplier using, let's say, disposable plastics or something which can harm the environment. So those things also have to be done. So handling and also ensuring kind of packaging that you are using, that need to be, because as an overall ESG requirement, we also will be focusing on that. Next step is, let's say, for the press shop itself. So the material has come in, now I look at my press shop. What kind of tonnage is it adequate, the bed sizes, automation level which is there, and how do you do the proving of the toolings? Because we do it in 2 different locations. One, when the press dies or tools are manufactured at a supplier end, we do the tryouts there, prove the dies. But when you ship it to the main location where you are going to finally do the series production, at that time, again, the proving and the process has to be laid down. So this kind of challenges definitely we will go through. So do they have the spotting presses? Do they understand the kind of tooling proving has to be done? And what is the amount of rejections which are likely to happen during this proving, and how quickly they are able to recover from that? Those things become very important. Then single minute exchange of dies. So do they have a concept of ensuring that the die changes are? So this tells us about the operational capabilities and the kind of improvement that they are likely to do or they are in the process of it. Then we look at, let's say, the product itself. So from the product standpoint, we'll have to look at outcome which is coming. Do they have wrinkle? Do they have spring back lubrication systems which are being used? So on and so forth. One step backwards, if I want to do, usually what happens with the MSMEs, the OE will do the design of the dies. They'll also do the flow analysis. So during the tooling preparation itself, they would have taken care. So MSME need not worry. But if there are certain components which have been offloaded, including the tool manufacturing, then that's a challenge, because MSME will have to also look at the flow analysis. So die design itself becomes another challenge. So those things we definitely have a possibility of. So usually OEs will be supporting, and there are a lot of systems put in place. Then output assets, we will looking at the geometry control. What kind of checking fixtures are available? Do they have a similar concept of rest locate plan which are there in OE, and same should be available at the MSME or the tier 1 supplier? Otherwise, we'll have a difference of how the inspection is done, and there is a gap in between the dimensions which get measured. So those are details which are really somebody goes into. Now coming to the kind of way this whole thing has to be approached is trying to look at whether do have quality systems in place which will have control plans or process FMEA, PPAP records, change management. So these are the systems which need to be ensured that are in place, and we ensure that these things are documented as well as the process is followed. Because unless until they follow this process, we would not be able to ensure that the quality outcome and the sustainable quality is what we would call it will not be possible. So volumes will come eventually, but we end up in trying to ensure that they prove quality first and slowly ramp up towards the quantity requirements. That is another thing. One of the bigger challenges which is coming up now, especially since we are talking about steel, comes is traceability. So let's say the batch sizes which are there or kind of batch heat codes, those things become very, very important. So it could be heat number which have been batched, then if it is, as I said, the sheet metal operations, how the batching is done. And the problem is that every batch to batch variation will also affect the OE, because when we do the welding together, then we also have a next level of problem. So the batch variations and how the quality is varying between the batches also need to be understood, because that is where the adjustments in the fixtures are done. And similarly, when we look at the machined components also, that same thing applies. So it's nothing different there.
So you just touched upon, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just try to complete a full view, which I said. Next comes is the maintenance. Very important is that they are taking care of the maintenance of their capital equipment. We are highly reliant. So when we look at any company, the essence is that people are taking care of the equipments, because through those equipments you are able to produce something. So unless until you have a good preventive maintenance plans, you have TPM or you have breakdown system analysis or any kind of spare inventory management, you will not be able to keep the uptime which we are looking for. Because as I said, every 2 minutes, if I'm making a car, back to back, I'd like to also ensure that the supply chain is working towards that and there are no breakdowns. If that breakdowns happen at their end, it is going to affect the OE lines. So OE starts understanding or looks into these aspects also. And you were saying something.
Yeah, I was just going on to my next question, which was related to quality, because you were touching upon quality at that point in time. We need to understand from you, sir, what are the minimum must-haves that MSMEs need to have in place in terms of quality for even for them to qualify?
Okay. This typically will look at bare minimum would be, I would say, that whether they have a system for ensuring the incoming inspection of the material is done, because whatever they are getting in need to be there. In process quality checks, because whatever is getting produced on their machines, on their lines, need to have a quality inspection system in process, and the feedback mechanism, because there we look at the reaction plan. And some things do go wrong. So we don't say things don't go wrong. But if it goes wrong, how quickly are you in a position to identify the issues and how quickly are you able to solve? So this in-process quality checks as a complete cycle we are able to take. Then what is the kind of final good inspection process which ensure that we or the OE gets the things that they're looking for in terms of quality, that is mandated. Then the quality calibration of the gauges and the documentation and the SOPs which are there. This become very important. And track and trace. Traceability is bottom line. So unless until you have this as a big package available, I don't think that any company would be interested in going ahead. Because as I said, unless until this bare minimum package is available, companies will not be able to trust the processes and the consistency or sustainability. So these aspects become very, very important.
So talking about consistency, how important is batch to batch uniformity when dealing with OEM clients, especially in steel parts?
Engineering, we call it as an engineering challenge for everybody. Our basic aim in engineering is to ensure that we don't have variability, or we make variability to the minimum. So that is the first fundamental. So any product or any process or any equipment that we look at, we always focus on reducing the variability. That is the first item. And when we looks to MSME, the first question will be, can you make this component consistently for 5 years at a zero failure risk? That becomes the biggest challenge, and that is how we want to look at it. And as I said, the reason for doing this is, if the variations keep on coming up and we have so many components to be assembled, car for example, if I take multiple panels are there, so any variation will lead to gaps in the panels, will lead to variation in the quality of the weld. So ultimately, as the car or the vehicle or any product that goes outside in the field will have a premature failure, or likely to have premature failures, or quality issues where NVH will be there, or structural failures could be there. So this variation is always a challenge where whole industry is working. So batch to batch variation minimum is we are trying to get, number one. Secondly, there are certain times where we find a stamping has been done and there is a variation. But if we know, hence I say traceability becomes very important. We do certain adjustment on the fixtures to ensure that is taken care and we don't have a quality problem or NVH problem in the field. So that also is possible. So we know the variation which is coming up. We take care and ensure the next step in the process when we do the welding, we ensure that we are in position. So two things get linked. One, batch to batch uniformity or variation of the tolerance which is available can be used. Beyond that, track and trace has to kick in, and that information transparently has to be given to OE, because then they are able to adjust a bit. It is not that we work 0-0, it is never possible. But that adjustment capability has to be inbuilt. And the main thing, as I said, over statistical, so SPC becomes extremely important, and we try to fit it as minimal spread of the process as possible. Sporadic incidences may happen a bit, but those then are taken care of by ensuring that we have certain things in place by adjustments in the fixturing, which will not impact the final product quality. Yeah.
Got it. So now many MSMEs believe that price is the biggest differentiator. According to you, how much weight do OEMs actually place on cost versus quality?
India is a different country and different, we have gone through that. So definitely there are two aspects. One, where the MSME understands is only cost, but it is not so. Over a lifetime or life cycle of the product, quality definitely is the most important there, because we look at the cost of ownership. So total cost of ownership when we want to catch, and total cost of production, the whole chain, if we want to say, quality comes the first. And in that, the consistency becomes the key. So quality definitely has a much more bigger weight. Now, having said that, India is, as I said, is a paradox, because our base pricing or the base challenge is trying to reduce. But it doesn't mean that we'll have to reduce the quality. So when I mean by quality, there are multiple aspects of looking at it. How you design the product. So product designs become a big challenge. But once the design is fixed, we definitely want a consistent quality of whatever has been designed. There is no discussion on consistency and able to deliver part. You may design the component as a cheaper alternate, but it will have a cost implication when it comes to the failure in the fields. So now MSMEs have to understand that OEs slowly have changed that aspect. So we have seen a couple of recent things when we have NCAP 5 ratings, which are there for Indian companies also. So that is a change which is coming. The steel components which are used are of extremely high quality. So when we say quality, it boils down to two aspects. One is the raw material which is used is of high quality. Second, the process through which you prepare or produce that also has to be of high. So both aspects on the longevity of the car or safety of the customer, these aspects cannot be compromised any further. So we are now shifting that, yes, you need to look at alternate materials, alternate processes, but not compromising the final quality of the product, which is as a final customer will use. So the life cycle of the product has to be ensured still. The quality base, that is no doubt about that.
Going ahead, the next leg of quality is certification. How important do you think are certifications like ISOs, QMS, or industry-specific standards when it comes to supplying to OEMs?
Yeah, certificates typically are, kind of means to show that okay, we are following certain amount of compliance or certain amount of discipline in the company, but this doesn't guarantee quality. It may be extremely clear on that. So you may have ISO certification or let's say VDA certification. This in spirit need to be followed. So there are two aspects. One, I always quote on this Toyota. Toyota, a lot of systems which are there, and the differentiation factor is that those systems have already been put on net and anybody can follow them. So the production system anybody can see and they can follow. However, the point is not about the system. The point about is the discipline which they use the system and they follow the system. So differentiating factor we'll have to understand. A company may be ISO or IATF or any certification they may have, but still doesn't mean in spirit it is used and the outcome is what is expected. So that differentiating factor, hence, as I said, even though you have a system, we look at sustainable, where a lot of regular audits are required, a lot of process checks are required, where companies or OEs will go to the shop floor and actually see the things for themselves, because they have to follow that. Having it on paper is one, and actually living it. So there is a difference between paper and living that system or certification. And yes, the certification, why is it important? Because it has got certain standard ways of doing things. I think that is very, very important. Because you raised earlier that where is the documentation in MSME? Yes, earlier non-existent. So let's say from no paper to first you need to come to a paper. And from that paper, you need to bring it in spirit that you follow that. There is a discipline and company uses that to improve itself. The concept is not about just having a paper, but the systems are designed to continuously improve upon. So that is the spirit which is used, then company will grow. So we look from that aspect.
Understood. Now, sir, talking about traceability, what kind of traceability systems do OEMs prefer, especially for mission critical steel components?
Yeah, mission critical steel component will start from, let's say, the heat number, batch size, the tracking has to be there, then wheel certification linkages, whether there are history records which are kept for the metallurgy. Those things are extremely important. And then the third-party inspection for the raw material and FG, for example. Yes, those are on audit basis. But then if it is mission critical, we also sometimes will ask for third-party inspection. So you have in-house spectrometry, but we will also demand for outside third-party inspection. Then next would be also trying to look at whether there is a trace of calibrations. So the equipment calibration, how often it is been done? Because the report is as good as the quality of the equipment that is going to do the certification. So we trying to look at that as well. Other than that, from a traceability system, we'll also look at whether there is a trace of who has done it. So the product is one. Second, what kind of process parameters were there during that time, and who were the people who were working on that? Because it gives us a very, let's say, holistic view upon what happened. And in case there is any undue incident in the field, we are able to trace back as to where the failure came from. That is one aspect which we look at. And traceability at the moment from, let's say, CBAM or let's say the ESG requirement which is coming up, because steel is energy intensive industry. So we'll be requiring traceability of the CO2 also. So some companies have already initiated. I think a lot of things have not been done. So eventually I would expect that for the steel making industries, the CBAM or the carbon emissions which are coming up because of the steel manufacturing basic process itself will be coming up. And in that, it's not only the steel. We'll also look at the renewables, what kind of renewable energy that you are using. So it's only not amount of energy, but the percentage of renewables that you try to get. But the essence will be, as I said, the product related traceability definitely, then process and the people who are working. That traceability also is equally important because that helps the companies to resolve and understand where the failure came from and how to resolve it. Hence, we ask for this kind of traceability.
Understood. So, can you also share an example where a lack of process documentation led to a rejection or loss of business for an OEM?
Typically, in sheet metal, I can think about one time when we were doing the tryout of the, let's say, door panels, and the panels will proved at the tool manufacturer end. So the tool manufacturer is sitting in South Korea and he is building those tools. The tool manufacturer has already proven the system. And since the tools were shipped to India, the process documentation was not available. So when they did the homeland tryouts, so the press parameters which are there in India are different from the tool manufacturer. So this process of validating the components which are coming out of this new press or the new set of parameters which are like, it was not done. So here the process documentation was missing as to how the proving was done. They did stamp the, let's say, a batch, and the whole lot had to be rejected because there was a huge amount of variation. So in short, the ecosystem that OE works typically is with no record is equal to no compliance. So do you have a record of how the proving was done? So as I said, the homeland tryout, you needed to have a process of how the die setting was there, spotting was done, based on which then you have done the first stamping. Have you taken the readings of the first couple of components? What variations were observed? And then you have done the whole batch. This process, if you skip or miss, then you stamp the whole batch and then the whole rejection. So this record maintaining of all these steps which are there become extremely important. And there are reasons, as I said, behind. So the first component out 100% quality inspected, and then you do the whole batch, then there is no issue. As you know, so this process not followed definitely leads to a much more bigger disaster, and that can simply be avoided by following those process steps.
So we've often heard from MSMEs about this question where they ask from an operations lens, how can MSMEs align their shop floor capabilities with OEM requirements without overspending?
Very good question, because we have a big challenge in terms of MSMEs. I can understand the capex. So OE would like to, kind of have, let's say, a system where the whole thing is digitized. I would prefer that let's say they have press shop and the press is fully digitized. I have IoT and then we are pulling all the data automatically. That doesn't happen because it's a capex intensive and it takes a lot of time. But OEs also have the next leg. As I said, in the manufacturing, we look for whether you have the process flow map, whether you have visual records. So how or what kind of documentation is kept, basis which we are in a position to, as I explained earlier, do you have a PDCA system? You understand what you want to do. And if there are any problems, we are able to mitigate very fast. So are there POCA-UKs? I understood there is a problem in my process. Have you implemented POCA? It could be a 4I principle. So somebody is producing, he is checking, then there is a next person to check. So these kind of simple mechanisms of POCA-UK are already available. So as a portion of the lean manufacturing, this definitely need to be in place, because then you are able to avoid a value-added reject. That is what we call it, value-added reject. It doesn't really add. So at every stage in the process, you need to do very check in the components for the product and ensure the variability in the process is managed. There are a lot of lean principles which definitely help, and we have seen a lot of companies during my last 4-year tenure, which I have gone through almost whole of the India is what I was. And a lot of simple examples like ensuring that the pressure gauge has got red, yellow, green marking. So the process parameters there itself are observed. Having a 4I principle to only inspect. And there have been companies where with very small, let's say one camera system, whether the process is followed or process steps are followed. Now AI with smaller cameras are in a position to do a lot of work And we have seen companies who have adopted those things, process steps and the component, how they are assembled together. These things are much more cheaper. So electronics is becoming cheaper, no doubt. I won't say that you put robotics, but wherever there is a mission critical, you can definitely use this kind of things. Preventive maintenance, again the whole thing, because your production is mainly on that asset. So the asset health becomes extremely important. And for that you don't need to spend so much money. You have definitely those charts in the lean manufacturing TPM where you follow up and ensure that all the process steps or checking is done. Other things which we can look for is layout optimizations. These are like small kaizens which in lean manufacturing you keep on doing day in, day out. So you need not wait for digitizing the whole factory. You can start with lean manufacturing. Once you're set up with lean manufacturing and you have got a good mindset change in the people that we need to do improvement day on day, day in, day out. Every day there has to be a improvement where we go to the next level. So this mindset becomes very important. So digitization alone doesn't help, because digital will give you a lot of information, but physically somebody will have to go and change on the shop floor. That mindset is first need to be done. For that, actually you don't need it. It's something which on paper, pencil and discussions and holding the team together, these things can definitely. And we have seen people.
Yeah. Sir, according to you, what do OEMs expect in terms of delivery timelines or schedules and logistic reliability from small vendors?
Yeah, as I said, the first example which I quoted was for steel. So when you're transferring any item, you need to ensure that the component is secured in a way because of the road conditions in India. So when we started the plant, we had a different challenge because the kind of logistics systems were not thought about or designed for the Indian roads. We have unfortunately bad roads. So we need to start taking care of it. So the logistics starts from how are you ensuring that the components are transferred from point A to point B in the quality, the quality security has to be there. The next topic is slowly OEs are going towards the ZGS, or let's say reduction of their inventories. So schedule adherence becomes very, very important. The quantity, quality, time, all these aspects of deliveries are being tracked now. So OEs are coming to that. So MSMEs are getting a schedule, they are getting what to be delivered at what time, with what gate. This concept is coming. So MSMEs also need to look from their supply chain, how they are going to be coming to that. Second is looking at the buffer plan. India is again one of the bigger challenges, especially when we look at automotive. Huge amount of changes in the production plan also comes in. So those buffering arrangements also you need to think about. So looking at the delivery chain, as I said, from the production itself, or having secured buffer raw material to securing raw, let's say the finished goods buffer, those concepts have to be thought through. Because of this, in India we have a slightly huge amount of variation in the production plans, and how you cater those buffers to a minuscule, because that buffer is nothing but a huge amount of inventory which is getting stuck, so money lost. So that concept of manufacturing execution system is what we talk about. How we are able to reduce your loads, that becomes very important. And as I said, aspect of delivery and ensuring that whatever quality output at your FG and incoming at the OE, that quality doesn't get hampered. So this whole chain need to be focused on.
So do OEMs prefer MSMEs that can offer value-added services like machining, finishing, or sub-assembly support?
Definitely. MSMEs, as I said, they are slowly coming to a level where they are able to do some value. So as I said, first was only I am supplying panel. Now I will do fitment of, let's say, nuts or bolts, or do a couple of small panel assemblies together. That is for the panel. Where it is casting or forging. Earlier there were raw materials, and then now we are looking at finishing. So maybe it is semi-finished or finished components. So slowly the value adds are coming up. And this is because most of them are becoming capex intensive and it requires a lot of land. So those value adds is something which the companies are saying that if my MSME or my suppliers are in a position to give me, more than happy. So they are looking for, that is one. Second, it's not only now components. So they are looking at system level. So can I get a complete system from it? So that is the next level of thing. Then the third level which comes is that I give you from design to supply. So you do the design also, I will tell you what parameters or what framework I'm looking at. And based on that, you only design, you only manufacture and you supply. So these levels are there. So India is slowly graduating to value add propositions from OE. There is no doubt about it. And we see a huge amount of change going to happen, including it could be like kitting, for example. So as I said, one is starting to only add a couple of components. In that next level, I add the design also. Next, the tier one would be doing a lot of component buying to the kits and then supply the kits to the OE, because that reduces their load to do all these logistics topics. So those things are coming definitely. So huge amount of value add OEs are looking from whoever can supply. So MSMEs definitely have a challenge because I can understand they will be able to do, let's say, sub-assemblies or machining or maybe kitting to an extent. But design is, let's say, far away. So, but slowly this graduation is happening.
So can you tell us, with your experience, how much focus is placed on digital readiness, things like ERP usage, e-invoicing, or digital QC records during OEM onboarding?
This is one of the biggest topics. So when I started my consulting, the whole focus, everybody was asking because I had a huge amount of experience what we did in B2B. And digital is, there's no, let's say everybody needs to go towards digitization. There is no other way. You need to have the base thing which we talk about is ERP integration. And with that, how your material is going to come. So your invoicing systems. And these two are the basic needs. Like those are taken for granted. They have to be there. Next level which we try to look at is what the quality data is getting attached. So how you're collecting the data and historical track and trace, as I explained to you, traceability becomes an extremely important. And then we also look at the different frameworks which we are creating now. Is the issue resolution framework and knowledge framework. So those frameworks is what get created. So slowly we graduate not only from having information, but going towards a process where I'm able to shorten the time for reaction. So any problem happens, I'm able to shorten that time. Or my resiliency is such a way that any change happens in the chain, I'm able to respond to the things faster. Now, this is only possible when you have a lot of data together of various systems. Let's say I have got a bunch of machines which I need to reschedule. Manually, it will take me a long time. But if I have an MES where the rescheduling need to be done, that can be done very fast. I have a breakdown. I have a system where I can go and in ERP or maintenance management system where I can fetch, do I have a spare part? Yes or no? To that level. Incidentally, we are going to the next level. So as I said, I don't have a spare part, but I have the agentic AI sitting on top. They can simply find the lowest lead time motor available and they can order. So this level of topics we are already started discussing. There are certain companies who have started working on those systems. So as I said, this has to be layered. One. Second, you can't wish out the digital transformation. It is going to be there. It is there, and it is going to be only increasing in all aspects of our life, because we are slowly coming from a paper organization to a paperless companies. So all digital formats. So drawings are going to be transferred digitally. Invoices are going to be transferred digitally, except for the components. Obviously, you need to physically transfer them. But then the information, wherever the data is there, that need to be interconnected, and that has to be integrated in such a way that OE changes whatever they do in OE side, that gets reflected immediately on the side of MSME. So this tight integration is what we are looking at. which will enable us to bring a lot of optimization in the cost, a lot of optimization in terms of reworks, quality, so on and so forth. So huge advantages are going to be there.
So how do OEMs typically assess risk when evaluating a new MSME supplier?
The first question I think we talked about how the assessment of MSME. The essence is trying to look at the stability and sustained systems that the MSMEs have. So the focus first is, as I said, on the people, because people are the main constituents where the change happens. The rest, everything is coming as. So who are the people? What kind of financial stability they have? What kind of, when we come to, let's say, the capacities or capabilities, those are the next aspects which we'll look at. Who are they dependent on a single customer, or what kind of geographical risk which are there? Do they have any issues in terms of compliance or legal issues? Those also we will be looking at. So those risks need to be evaluated, because we have seen many companies, and that's something which probably you will be requiring. I think finance for non-finance is something which need to be brought in. Most of the MSMEs have a problem in the cash flows and the kind of management there. Hence, I said financial stability. We are looking at much more bigger picture and deep diving into the financial aspects of that, how these things are managed. So, and who are the people? So these two things become very, very important. Most of the companies have a problem in India just because of cash flows. It's not about technology. It's not about the product quality also. Cash flows. So those aspects we definitely will deep dive.
So talking about sustainability, do you think our larger MSMEs are now considering environment friendly or environment compliant even with tier 2 or tier 3 vendors?
I'll just try to give a bigger aspect what OE is expected to do. ESG is becoming mandatory. So BSRS reporting for the companies which are listed is mandatory. In addition, like for steel, the CBAM will come in place. So if you are going to export to Europe, the CBAM becomes as a mandate. That means you'll have to declare the carbon emissions which are derived from the steel manufacture. So sustainable factory, if you want to create, you need to have all this data together. So OEs are now forced to collect scope 1, scope 2. Scope 3 is still a long way. But that pressure from OEs definitely will come on tier 1 first. Then it goes to the tier 2 and tier 3. So we have seen a couple of companies in India where tier 1 is already done. Tier 2 and tier 3 is on way. But surely this thing will happen. So where we are looking at, like energy consumption, then what type of energy have you consumed? How much is from renewable? What kind of a carbon which can? Because 65% of the energy which is created in India is from coal, that we know. So those aspects become very, very important. The other aspect which typically will be as to what kind of a waste disposal is there? What kind of recycling practices are? Are your products in a position to be recycled? And at what cost, or how difficult is it to reuse or recycle the product? Those aspects have started, let's say, coming in. They are kicking in. It will be only question of time as we go. Those things will start becoming more stringent. And the ESG will definitely cascade to the whole thing. As a small example, I can tell you, if I look at car manufacturing, I will start from mining. How much did the mining aspect take from the carbon standpoint, what was my spend, right up to the disposal of the car at the end of the life cycle. So the whole chain of events we need to look at. So that collection is required. It's very difficult. But the steps have already been initiated. And when we, let's say, at the end of the life cycle, the car is scrapped. What does the scrap mean? Are you able to recycle? Can I bring the steel back? How difficult is it? What kind of cost does it mean? These aspects are already under discussion. I don't think that we are yet there, but the process has already been initiated.
Got it. So now for MSMEs serving auto or white good OEMs, what part level integration practices are becoming a must for them?
product level, when we look at the, let's say take example of, as I said, one we are looking at whether the design is for manufacturability and those kind of things, and whether we are looking from aspect where they are participating in designing. Let's say I want to buy steel, so we design for a certain type of steel, but then the manufacturer is not making that type of steel. So alternate example. So when we do a prototype, the participation from the steel industry with their technical expert also mandate. So when we look at those aspects, we need to collaborate together when the R&D is going on. And design for manufacturability, when we say, let's say we are doing casting, or let's say we are doing forging, those tools need to be, or manufacturability of sheet metal components. The dies have to be manufacturable. So those aspects definitely, when the integration happens, it becomes must. Next initiatives which we look at for is the VAV, so value addition and value engineering. How the supplier is in a position to bring different ideas, how they see value. So OE doesn't have knowledge of everything. So those aspects or different perspectives can be definitely brought. Then lightweighting inputs, that's still been, since we are talking about, everywhere the focus is on lightweighting because it improves the efficiency of the vehicle. So those aspects definitely are going to be the focus. So anywhere we put it, how effectively MSME or any component supplier or any suppliers can add value. That's what will be different.
So, sir, what role does proactive communication or issue reporting play in retaining OEM trust and contracts?
I think the Homeland tried when I gave the example of the press. So the components were brought here, they stamped it, the whole batch was ready, and then they didn't escalate. So the problem now is that they have already stamped and made the components ready. They thought that the components could be used, they could not use. Now we have a problem because then we have to stop production because shortage of components. So these aspects definitely there. So early escalations and timely escalations and giving an action plan, CAPA, this become extremely important because as I said, the cycle times of all this white good manufacturing or automotive is very, very less. So anything that happens is all dependent on transparent and open communication with OE. There's no doubt about it. So having this transparency and trying to give not only a problem statement, but trying to give a recovery plan only will build a long-term, kind of relationship. And things go wrong. It's not that everything is always best. No, things go wrong. But then how you react when the things go wrong becomes the crux of the whole thing, because that is where the trust gets built.
Okay. Can you also help share a success story, sir, with our attendees where a steel MSME scaled up just by aligning with one OEM's evolving requirement?
Yeah, let's say the development, as I said, one area where we get from MNC when we look at, they have global standards and they bring their steel specs from Germany in this case, for example. But then when it comes locally, we wanted to source it locally. So the steel manufacturer didn't have that same grade, but with certain modifications in there, with a different grade, they were able to supply, not exactly the same standard, but it would suffice the requirement for the component. So those kind of aspects we have seen where the value add from the steel manufacturer has been there, where they also were able to prove, and it happened reverse. So now the concept has been changed. Okay, this also is possible. So you have alternate grade also. So this value add from suppliers has been done. There's no doubt about that. Addition to that, the success stories which we can talk about is reliability in terms of their digital traceability, or giving value-added propositions, or trying to help us in taking over certain aspects of business. As I said, can you add to kitting, or can you add to additional assemblies, or can you do machining, not only forging, but you do machining and then go to fanning. these aspects have also helped. So it has helped both. One, it has helped the OE, and also the MSME has grown to the next level. So it is 3x, 4x kind of a improvement that we see when the value add happens.
Finally, so our last question to you is, what advice would you like to give MSMEs looking to build long-term OEM partnerships in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, built on trust. So the trust factor definitely is going to be there. It has to bring a lot of partnership in terms of value add, as I talked about earlier. Always look for technical depth of how you are going to do that. Second is the speed of execution and transparency, as I said actually. So this is becoming one package where not only the cost would be impacted, but then looking at a very long-term aspect and looking at how the volumes are likely to grow, this becomes very important. But then MSMEs have a lot of things that they need to do. One is build system and ensure that the quality as a base is put before you kind of ramp up the volumes. Because most of the cases which we have seen in India happening is they don't anticipate the kind of scaling of volumes. So they run on lower capex, and when the volumes really come in, they are not in sync with the OE. Then somehow, then there is a big gap. So when you are ramping up, so OE is ramping up and then they are falling short. These aspects which we have seen. So the system were not built. So there are a lot of OEs now who participate in ensuring that the strategic direction of that company is also taken, and then that ramp up is kind of synced. Investment in quality and not just systems, very, very important. People have invested in certain systems, but the quality output and the mindset has not been brought. So I would say that we need to work a lot in India, especially for the mindset. And that is one of my bigger tasks, is not only talking about this, but focusing on the mindset change. Go digital as early as possible. So there could be certain steps where you start understanding. I won't say that everything is required. I'm not a friend of doing everything at one shot. You do in some phases or certain strategic steps, but that roadmap has to be created in the digital form. There is no way you can live without it. Technical things having talked about, we'll talk about, let's say, compliance aspect. So legal compliances are there, sustainability compliance, ESG is what we talk about. These are going to be coming in. So 2030, you will find a huge amount of changes which are likely to be there. Obviously, there are certain changes because of the geopolitical issues. But sustainability is going to be the key factor for everybody. So, which we see, this information helps in doing two things. One, I have seen from the other aspects when I was working, when we had looked into our energy consumption and we immediately went to solar or putting those things. So it brought down the cost. So sustainability, I'm looking not only from world aspect, also helps. So it is two-way. It helps the company, it helps them. Both aspects is what we are able to capture. Then also they need to look for collaborating with certain experts in the general field and collaborate much more effectively with OEs. OEs, certain areas have very huge amount of information, a lot of different systems. So MSMEs have, let's say we have 16949 and PDA. So they have a good combination. They need to now capitalize on that. So one supplier is doing for a company in India and one for same guy is doing for a company in Germany. They have understanding of different systems. Can I do best of both and make my process much more robust and much more better? This aspect from that improvement standpoint need to be looked into, and not just kind of this OE wants this system, hence I'm following. No, they need to change their mindset and how will I improve. If that aspect is done, I think it will be really useful. And as I said, finance. The bottom line has to be so improvement in the understanding of finance, because finance at the end only does reporting, but actual finance happens on the shop floor. So this is very, very interesting and very important. With that, I think
this brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you so much for sharing your detailed insights with our attendees and for being on our MSME Masterclass. Thank you so much, sir. It means a lot.
Good. Thank you very much for having me. And I think there are a lot of good things that you are doing. So all the best to you and this initiative which has been taken by JSW. I believe this will go a long way in creating a knowledge mindset and looking for a lot of improvements with the MSMEs. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, sir. For our MSMEs who are online, if you'd like to view the current episode, if you've missed any part of this exclusive episode on OEMs, please go on YouTube, type JSW1 MSME and you'll find all our episodes uploaded there. Thank you once again, sir. Bye-bye.